This video is full of spoilers for literally everything ever. Watching it is like looking into the eyes of the truth tortoise, so if that's not something you want, then go away. Alright, now that they're gone, we can talk about the things. Steven Universe Future is a spin-off to Steven Universe, which takes place a couple of years after the ending of the original show. It uses the previously established world and lore to tell its own self-contained story, and I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. Except when it wasn't. Of course it wasn't flawless. Sunstone was in it. But in many ways I think it was a well-executed season of television that tells a story that doesn't often get told. And no, I don't just mean that it's a kids show that touches on mental health issues. Steven Universe, the original show, ended with a shockingly bad finale to its 5th season. I outlined my criticisms of that finale in this video here if you want to hear more about that, but in short it gave a very rushed solution to the entire conflict of the show, and tried to give the series' main villain that they'd been building up to for those 5 seasons a redemption arc that lasted about 10 minutes, and one scene that all took place in a single room, which by the way was her first scene of more than 30 seconds. Thanks for spending 5 seasons building up to that. At the time I said this ruined the show, and yeah, I stand by that. Seeing how all of these character arcs and plot lines were slowly progressing was to me the core appeal of the show, and with one episode, it was gone. The things that I was watching for had been taken away and shat on, and for that reason I don't think the word ruined is hyperbolic in any way. But that doesn't mean that they can't then go ahead and add some new kind of appeal to the show. Steven Universe Future isn't about uncovering ancient alien mysteries. It isn't about trying to topple an oppressive alien empire. It's about living in this new world that was created by the end of the conflict in the end of the old show. Proving to us all that even after a garbage fire you can still arrange the ashes into pretty shapes if you want. Part 1. When an evil empire falls, what happens to the people in it? You'd think that with all the popular media there is about toppling evil empires out there, that this is the kind of question you'd see addressed a lot, or even a bit. But at least in terms of the 3 pieces of media I've consumed, Steven Universe Future is the first thing I've seen address this question properly. The conflict is over, but dedicating an entire season to the aftermath has actually turned out to be a really good idea. It's certainly not perfect in its execution, but there's a lot to be appreciated here. I'd like to bring my first piece of evidence to the table, the show's 2nd episode, Guidance. But before I can do that, the 5 seasons worth of backstory, you need to understand it. This is a gem, an alien that likely comes from the Gem Empire.
Am I the only one who calls the Gem Empire the Gempire? Okay, just me.
I'm pretty disappointed they didn't call the Gem Empire the Gempire, and I can't forgive them.
Call it the Gempire, coward.
They missed out on a great way to shorten it to Gempire instead of Gem Empire.
Oh, come on! They didn't call it the Gempire?
The worst crime these writers committed was not referring to the Gem Empire as the Gempire. Come on now.
Just call it the Gempire.
I've never watched the show, but has anybody ever called it a Gempire?
Why are they not called
You
the
could have called
Gempire?
it a Gempire, but you missed your chance.
Alright, fine. This is a gem, an alien that likely comes from the Gempire, an interstellar alien dictatorship. The Gempire was formerly an oppressive regime with almost no personal liberties or freedoms for its citizens. Unlike humans who are just squelched out of a continent expected to get a job, gems are designed and built by the Gempire to fulfill a specific function, and then forced by the state to fulfill that function. Pearls are built to be personal servants, rubies are built to be guards, diamonds are built to have rushed character development. No, I was right the first time. If you're a gem living in the Gem Empire, you do what you're told, and if you don't, bye-bye. That's a death ray. The Gempire existed like this for thousands of years until yada yada rebellion, starry-eyed idealist, Steven Universe wants everyone to be free so that they don't have to fulfill the roles given to them by their society, but rather can choose to do whatever it is they want to do. That'd be nice. Well, with a little help from the rest of the rebellion, Steven is able to make that happen, and we won't talk about how he did that right now, because I've already talked about it really hard. Guidance takes the vision that Steven had for the society that he wanted to create and bums it in front of him. It's a short, self-contained story that feels a lot like a season 1 or 2 episode of the original show. It opens showing Steven impressed with how well some gems are integrating into human society, before he realizes that most of the newly freed aliens are getting jobs doing exactly what they would have been doing before they were freed.
I don't know about this. Ice gems doing ice stuff, pilot gems doing pilot stuff, guard gems doing guard stuff. Isn't that exactly what they were doing on Homeworld?
It's just like we used to do on Homeworld!
I will say it here and now, subtlety, not one of the show's strongest areas. Steven's vision of a free world had always involved gems doing whatever they wanted to do. And obviously when he would have been thinking about that, the things he was envisioning them wanting to do wouldn't have been exactly what they were doing anyway. The gems may be free, but they certainly don't look like his vision of free to him. Don't worry, Steven can fix it. He goes around all of these gems who are doing what they would have been doing anyway before they were freed and gives them new jobs to try.
I don't know about this!
Fuck you, joke. Most of the rebellion had been made up of gems who wanted to do something dramatically different from what they were made for. I mean, for many of them, that's why they rebelled in the first place. So Steven assumes that just give all these new guys a little nudge and they'll be right on that same path, finding a new calling that they were never free to pursue before. Well, as it turns out, Steven made the wrong call. Rather than being an encouraging mentor, he's just pushed people out of their comfort zone before they're ready. Now, I will say that I think the show goes a little too farcical on this. I get that it's the style they're going for and everything being exaggerated is kind of the point, but like, man, you're giving the gem that was built for cutting stuff a job handing out balloons? Oh fuck me, I wonder what's gonna happen here. It's going to cause a plane crash. What's nice here is seeing the values that Steven has held throughout the course of the show being confronted. He's the same character he's always been. There's nothing changed about him. Well, no, stuff has changed about him, but not this thing specifically. But all these ideals that he had that pushed him to act during the war, these same character traits he's always had, are now leading him to do things that are actually detrimental during peacetime. He's not fighting against brutal oppressors anymore, and the fact that some people might actually want to do the thing that they were doing anyway is a nice lesson to see him learn. Getting everyone to behave the way you want them to is definitely not the point of being free. Being so well cut out to finding solutions for problems that he might have found in the old show, he's not as well cut out for finding solutions in these new situations, which a lot of the show is about. The episode ends, quite importantly I feel, with one of the gems that Steven tried to help finding her new calling. This shows that there is still help that Steven can give, he's just not found the right approach.
I just wanted to say thanks for the amusement park job. I'm good at handing out prizes to children, and I love their laughter. It sounds just like screaming.
So we've had an episode about if you're truly free, then you should be free to do what you were doing before. Except that doesn't always apply. When a gem who works as a bodyguard in the Gempire decides that, you know what, she'd still quite like to be a bodyguard in the new world, that's fine. But in the kind of tyrannical society that needs a revolution to overthrow it, there are going to be elements of that society that aren't compatible with a new free society. Hey, what do you know? There's an episode about that. Why So Blue is the episode that explores the idea that what if there are former citizens of the former Gempire that are still attached to the old ways of doing things in ways that are harmful?
How can the thing we've always done just suddenly be wrong?
Now, personally, I'm quite glad that this story was done using a fictional issue from the world of Steven Universe that doesn't have a clear, explicit real-world parallel. This story could have been about gems who don't understand why they're not allowed to own other people anymore, and refuse to treat pearls as equals. But frankly, considering this show's relationship with subtlety, I'm really glad that this episode doesn't choose to deal with an issue with an explicit real-life parallel. It's capable of exploring the ideas it wants to without bringing up a real-life hot topic, and by virtue of doing so is able to keep a more light-hearted tone than it wouldn't really be able to if it contained a clear allegory for racism or something. It's on an alien planet surrounded by blue plants and penis flowers that we meet a couple of lapis lazulis, which in the Gempire were the gems responsible for terraforming new planets to make them suitable for gem colonization. This pair is in progress of terraforming the planet, causing great damage to the indigenous life in the process.
The Empire is over.
We know.
The diamonds don't control you anymore.
That's right.
Well, you don't have to terraform planets for them anymore. You're free to do whatever you like.
I see. This is just a misunderstanding. Terraforming is what we like.
This story is so important from a world-building perspective. Most evil empire toppling stories will treat the toppling off that empire as a nice little bow to tie off the series with. But by creating an epilogue series and filling it with episodes like these, Steven Universe acknowledges that it's going to be a messy process, cleaning up all the damage done by such a powerful backward society. Their powerful fist may be lifted, but their influence is going to live on for a very long time.
You really expect us to dance and sing like pearls?
The rule of the tyrannical diamonds finally being lifted doesn't mean that the values they instilled in their subjects will disappear. The episode ends with our lapis lazuli, the one that we've known for a very long time, losing control and attacking the two newcomers. She wins the fight, but regrets initiating it as violent violence isn't the answer. Another nice message to get in here while we're at it. The show does a pretty good job exploring these areas that are generally left unexplored by popular media. The world building really excels in this regard. Part 2. Character and character arcs. Oh fuck. Okay, so a lot of characters in Steven Universe Future got the short end of the stick, shall we say? Like, Greg. Did you like him? Well, he's negligent, and it's not like he suddenly does something out of character. In fact, it's shockingly well integrated into his existing character. The implication that the reason Steven never went to school or never went to hospital was because Greg didn't want to send him there. Because Greg was overreacting in response to his experiences with his own over-controlling parents. This doesn't contradict what we already knew about Greg's character. In fact, it gels quite well, but I can understand if you totally hate this. I mean, I don't. I'm weirdly okay with it, but taking a beloved character and sticking a big ol' new flaw in him that wasn't really explored before is a risky decision. Ha. The crystal gems themselves are a mixed bag. Amethyst is there and acts within character, but doesn't get a great deal to do. Garnet gets almost totally sidelined, but it's not like that's anything new. Pearl, I feel, gets treated quite well. She finally manages to overcome her distaste for shapeshifting, something that's made her uncomfortable since Rose asked her to do it when she was faking her death. Like, more than half of Pearl's arcs in the show have been about her dealing with the pain that's left over from her experiences with Rose, or Pink Diamond. And while she acknowledges that the pain hasn't just gone away,
how did you stop hurting? I didn't.
It's nice to see she's got to a place where it doesn't overwhelm her and she's able to live her life normally. And then there's Steven. Ooh, first of all, I'd like to get it out of the way that I'm not going to be commenting on how well the show tackles issues of mental health. It's really not something I'm qualified to speak on. This season gives Steven PTSD, and if you want to hear about how accurate a portrayal of PTSD this actually is, you'll have to watch another video that is not this one. I'm here to talk about his character arc just as a character arc rather than as a portrayal of mental health issues. As we open the show with episode 1, Steven is his old, happy, chipper self trying to do nothing but help others. This is how he was characterized throughout the original show. Cheerful, compassionate, always looking for a non-violent solution to any given problem. Steven goes to see Jasper, a former soldier of the Gempire, a villain from the original show who's still stuck in her old ways, but also not really causing any harm to speak of. She's just keeping to herself for the time being. Steven went to see her to see if he couldn't persuade her to try and play nicely with everyone else, and join the new society he's building. He starts to get annoyed with Jasper quite quickly.
I only came here because I felt bad for you.
In his state of annoyance, he agrees to fight her one-on-one.
If you think you're hard enough to tell me what to do, then fight me and prove it.
Fine.
Really?
Oh, she's so happy. We're starting to push Steven's character now. He's never really been one to lose his temper easily, and as a big pacifist boy, he certainly doesn't like fighting people, and wouldn't have agreed to this fight in previous seasons. Since this is the first episode of this season, we've not seen him develop to this point. But I don't think it's actually pushed him further than it's reasonable to yet. We've had a huge time skip between the last season and this one. Puberty has hit him like a train, which of course is going to be playing havoc with his emotions. But most importantly, like half of this season is devoted to explaining the things that have made Steven change. The show will later go on to show that his social circle is rapidly changing, that he's scared he's going to lose friends that he depends on for support, and that he's scared that he doesn't really know how to make new friends. He's growing more and more anxious as time goes on, and the trauma he's experienced certainly can't be helping. All of the emotional weight is piling up on his shoulders, which is causing him to lash out more than he usually would. On top of that, he's not only fighting someone who wants to fight him, she's actively thrilled by the concept. And then during the fight, he only acts defensively, blocking Jasper's attacks, not throwing any of his own to speak of. I'm totally happy to accept this is in character. This may not be exactly the Steven I know, but it's pretty close, and there's a reason for the differences. But then, Jasper starts insulting Steven, which sends him into a blinding rage, and he starts battering the shit out of her. Yeah, this is where it takes it a little too far. This whole season takes Steven on an arc of losing his cool. He has a nervous breakdown and starts lashing out, falling further and further from grace with each passing episode. Giving Steven an arc where he falls isn't a bad idea. In fact, I really like it. But considering how goody two-shoes Steven has been up until this point, it's something you really have to earn. And having the the character that you've known as a pacifist for like 5 years suddenly start beating the shit out of someone with no build up to that point is not how you earn it. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest failing of the season. All you need is 10 episodes or so leading up to this point where Steven becomes progressively less and less stable. Earn the fall of this character, please, because once he's actually falling, it's thrilling to watch in a sort of, oh god, I can't watch kind of a way. Several episodes take the format of Steven trying to help someone out with one of their problems in a way that he always would have, but because of his newfound emotional instability and loss of perspective, every time he gets something fundamentally wrong and fails to see that it's actually him who needs help. After a whole season of trying to help but just making things worse for not only himself but for everyone around him as well, he ends up in denial over it and ends up having a full-on, very convincing meltdown. The parts of his arc that are solid are very solid, although that's kind of self-fulfilling, isn't it? This statement is self-fulfilling. There you go. It's just a huge shame that they didn't earn their way to this arc. His journey from who he is in episode 1 to who he is in the finale is convincing and heartbreaking, but who he was in episode 1 was out of character. Those 10 extra episodes would have done so much for this show. But instead, if you want to enjoy it, you've got to justify and bridge that gap yourself. Otherwise, for all 20 episodes, you'll just feel that you're watching Steven act out of character. And bridging gaps like that really shouldn't be on the viewer, come on. Before we actually get to the finale, I feel like it's worth mentioning the diamonds in this, because they're in this series too, and hey, remember how, well, at the beginning of the video, and in a whole video of its own, I complained about how they took a single episode of the show to go from the main villains to completely redeemed in one of the most rushed and infuriating character arcs I've ever seen. And as a result, seeing them in this is painful. All semblance of what they were what feels like 10 minutes ago has not only been scrubbed away, it's been completely reversed. They are the opposite characters to who they were before this one episode of the show. Man, it's a good job that Steven said no you to White Diamond at the right time, eh?
You're just acting like a child! I am a child. What's your excuse?
We literally see each diamond going out of their way to help other people out of their own good nature.
I was just reversing one of my awful experiments.
Well, you are
Yellow.
diamond! That is
Yellow.
diamond's gem. You do not
Act.
like this. You are not.
An altruist.
You're acting like a
Completely different character for some reason. Part 3. Finale? What I'm counting as the finale is the last 3 episodes of the show. The first of the 3 is Steven in the peak of his meltdown. Having tried and failed to help so many people this season, he's desperately going around to try and prove to himself that nothing's wrong, he's still the same old person he always was. He can still help people, even in this new context that's not the one he's used to dealing with. He'll be fine. I mean, the episode is literally called Everything's Fine. It's one step away from having that little cartoon dog sitting in the fire in it, you know the one. Everything in this episode is exaggerated to extremes to be farcical in a very cartoony way.
I did it. I didn't mess anything up. I'm sorry. We all make mistakes, and as long as we improve ourselves, everything is gonna be okay. All right, let's get to it.
The emotional beats are on point in this episode. Steven helps people, that's who he is, and he has no way to deal with the feeling that he's losing the part of himself that he defines himself by.
Steven's here to help! Steven, help! Steven, help!
The episode ends with a full-on Steven freakout, which, because of his non-human origins, results in him turning into a giant Godzilla monster. The show did a fairly good job establishing precedent for this. It's established relatively early on in the series that gems can lose control of their own forms if they feel a certain way, with Pink Pearl now called Volleyball, who has a permanent scar that she can't get rid of even via shapeshifting. Couple that with the fact that every time Steven loses control of his emotions in this series, he's been losing control of his form as well. Obviously I'm not saying, therefore the only logical result of him completely losing control is to turn into a giant Godzilla, but it's not like they didn't establish a precedent for things like this happening, although on a smaller scale. They could have set this up better, but it's not like it comes out of nowhere. Steven spends a full episode as Godzilla Godzilla Steven, which is the second episode out of the 3. And of the 3, I've got to say it's probably the weakest. The basic plot and story beats are fine. Steven is Godzilla Steven because he's in, let's say, a bit of a bad mood. And the rest of the show's characters, who he's helped over the years, hug him and let him know that whenever he needs it, they'll be there to provide their unconditional love and support for him. They managed to snap him out of it for long enough that he can stop being a giant pink Godzilla, something I'm sure we can all relate to. And if this was presented as, now he's cured, he's fine, he's back to regular old Steven, then that would be awful. But it's not presented like that at all. This just starts him on a road to recovery. It helps him stop getting worse and start getting better. I know that some people really don't like the fact that therapy is only mentioned in passing as part of his recovery, and perhaps that does make it worse at teaching kids about mental health, but in terms of just an arc, I feel that it's fine to end it with him simply on the road to getting better. Plus, I don't think it was that good at teaching kids about mental health anyway. Oh, I said I wouldn't comment on this. Because I don't know what I'm talking about. Do not listen to me! The basic story beats are perfectly good, but in terms of execution, it starts to fall. The dialogue is all very on the nose, what you might call prequel dialogue, but with more characters crying and talking about their feelings and how it's all their fault. And the whole thing is bogged down by the presence of the Diamonds, who also show up to come and support Steven, and seeing how differently they act now from how they used to act just a couple of appearances ago gave me physical whiplash.
Like I heard yellow and blue and Steven and everyone in the entire universe.
Right now, you are hurting me. Look how they massacred my diamond. I can't blame Steven Universe Future for obliterating the Diamond's characters. It was Change Your Mind that did that. But as a result of that obliteration, their being here and a lot of focus being given to them really drags down the episode they're in. The final episode of the 3, called The Future, also exists. No, I'll give it a little more than that. We pick back up with Steven after a long time skip. He's well into his recovery, but still going to therapy. The episode is him saying goodbye to people as he's decided to leave home to explore the world and may never come back. At least not to live in Beach City. The episode is cute and harmless, if not a little overdone at some points. It really acts as an epilogue to the epilogue, just showing us that Steven does, for the most part, recover and has grown up and overcome his fears of change to an extent where he's happy to move out. And that's it. That's Steven Universe Future. Kind of a mess, but I do like it. There's certainly some great stuff in there, but to get to it, you've got to overlook some other stuff, which sums up Steven Universe as a whole, really. Before I go, if you're a fan of my work, particularly my work involving Star Wars or Terminator, or other classic sci-fi, I'd like to bring you a sponsor that I'm genuinely excited to work with and think you will enjoy. I don't just take any old sponsorship, and that's why you don't see my videos sponsored very often. And if you like my videos, I'm assuming you'll be into the idea of a 4+ hour retrospective documentary on 80s science fiction. Yes, I'm being sponsored by a fellow disciple of the Long, and it feels great. Here's a trailer for In Search of Tomorrow.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
Shall we play a game?
Here we go.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Do or do not. There is no try.
I can handle myself.
Yeah, I noticed.
The sleeper has awakened!
Click the link in the description below if you would like to support their Kickstarter campaign, or just learn more about what it is they're doing. Like, for instance, the 40+ names they've already got attached to the project, including Will Wheaton, who I'm particularly excited about as a big TNG fanboy myself. There are plenty of perks for backing this project if you're interested. Alright, that's all I have for you today. I hope that you've enjoyed, and I've missed this regular outro music. Let's go.